Hello everybody, this is Omar, and today I wanted to demo something that I did a few months back for a client who wanted a sort of end-to-end employee timekeeping and analytics solution. That client was a plumbing company. This plumbing company hired 12 plumbers, and they had contracts to work on about 5 or 6 restaurants where the plumbers would go and do work. Oval represents the city that they were operating in. A plumber lives here, another plumber lives here, one restaurant here, there's another one here. Now, each of these employees gets paid at a certain rate, but they have two different rates. For example, if we take this plumber here, we're going to call him Dwalin, and if you know where that name is from, you and I can be best friends forever. But let's take Dwalin and let's draw a circle around him that represents a 10-mile radius. Right, so now all the restaurants that are inside this circle, which get paid, let's say for example, $10 an hour to work at any one of these two restaurants. But if he's assigned to go and work outside of this circle, let's say to this restaurant here or this one here, he's going to get paid $13. He gets paid exactly what the in-town and out-of-town pay rates will be for any given employee depends on the rank that has been assigned to that employee. And each rank has, its own pay scale. Naturally, some people get paid more than others. Lastly, once an employee reaches 40 hours a week, and it doesn't matter what projects he worked on during the week to accrue those hours, any hours above 40 will be paid at time and a half. So we have 3 objectives on this project. First of all, we want to have a time entry system for the employees. So that's going to be a way that the employees tell us, this is how many hours I worked on this project today. Then we want to process payroll. We want to see how much the employee should get paid for the hours that they've reported. Lastly, what we want to do is to analyze costs and so that we can kind of optimize our expenses and smooth out discrepancies and to make sure that we're allocating employees in the most efficient way. Let's start with the first phase of time entry. Go back to our map. So let's say that it's Monday morning. Dwalin gets up and then he goes to work at this restaurant, which is Sandy's. And let's say he spends about 3 hours working on a project at Sandy's. When he finishes up and he leaves Sandy's, he's going to send us a quick email. To send it to this email address, which line he's going to write Sandy's, and in the body of the email he's only going to write the number of hours that he spent. And that's it, and he's just going to hit send. When he's done with Sandy's, he's going to go to his next stop. Same thing, once he's done working there, as he's leaving the location, he's going to send us an email just like this one here, and each employee is going to do that for each project every time they go and work on a job. And then in my inbox, I have set up a folder called intake, and I've set up filtering rules so that every time I get an email from any one of the employees, they will all get routed to the intake folder. Time logs get gathered into this folder, and then I wrote a script in VBA that's basically going to pull each item one by one and just extract the data and process it. And this here is the script, just to sort of give you a peek under the hood. And so let me explain what this is going to do for us. Alright, so from each email that the employees send us, we can get 4 bits of data. We're going to get the time that the employee sent the email, we're going to get the email address that they sent it to, we're going to get the name of the job in the subject line, and we're going to get the number of hours. But that's not enough for us to figure out how much to pay them for those hours that they worked, because we need more information. Specifically, what we need are the following items. Well, first of all, we need their name. We don't technically have their name. All we have is the email that they sent it to. So we need to pull that. We need their grade. We need to know what their rank is so we can pull the right pay scale for them and see what their in-town and out-of-town rates are. Then we need to see whether this job is a job that is an in-town job for that employee or an out-of-town job for that employee, because again, that's not something that is contained in the email. The email just tells us the name of the job that they went to. Then we need to know how many hours have they already accrued this week, because let's say that this is an email that was sent on Wednesday or Thursday. They may have already hit their 40 hours, so we need to decide whether these hours have to be paid at the overtime rate or not. And again, that information is not in the email. That's okay, we're going to pull it up from our system on the back end. And then lastly, once we have all of those bits of information, then we can calculate how much to pay them for these hours. Walk you through the worksheet and the tables that are going to be relied on to get this information. In our workbook, we have this sheet down here called the master log, and this is where each email is going to get parsed out, and these columns are going to get filled out once the script has run and it's filled in the rest of the information. But this is kind of the aggregate where everything gets compiled together, and this is where we're going to run analytics off down the line. But to get from the email into this, like, as you see, there's stuff in here that's not in the email. We're going to have to refer to other tables that are contained in the workbook. So first of all, we want to get information on the employee, right? We needed to see what their name was and what their pay grade was. So we're going to go over to employees. In employees, we have two tables. We have, in the first table, we have the names of all the employees, what their title is, their rank is, and what email address has been assigned to them. The reason that I decided to normalize this data out into two separate tables is because it makes the system more flexible and more scalable. So let's say an employee gets a promotion, all we have to do is change their title instead of also having to update the rates for that title. And if at some point the company decides it wants to give an across-the-board raise to all grade 2 employees, and it wants to up the rate from 7 to 10 and so on, all we have to do is make those changes once here, and they're going to be applied wherever we have a grade 2 employee. Effectively, what we've done here is that we've spoofed a relational database using VBA. And I know that some of you are thinking, why would you not just use, SQL or SQL Server or something to do this? I mean, it's just what the scope of the project was. And I mean, if anything, it's a testament to the power of VBA and what you can do with VBA code in Excel. Look at what the location of this job is and the hours per week. And to find the location, we're going to go back to the workbook. We're going to go down here to something I call the job matrix. The script is going to go down this list until it finds a match for the job name, and then once it does that, it's going to go to the right until it finds a match for the employee's name in the column heading, and at the intersection of these two, you're going to find the value. It's going to be either local or out of town, and that's going to, once it has that value, it's going to then select the appropriate rate from this column, so it knows that the last piece of the puzzle, which is, has he hit overtime? And see whether overtime needs to be paid. The code will go over to the weekly hours sheet where we have a table. In the first column, we have a list of weeks. Excel will read the date that the email was sent on and see which week it falls into. It will then go to the right to find the column for that employee, and then it will read the value in the cell, which is the number of hours that they've worked so far. It'll use that to determine whether or not to pay it overtime rates, and then it'll increment that by the number of new hours so that the next time around we come by, we have an updated count of hours. If the date is in a new week that's not listed here, the program will create a new row. It will add the new week number, and then it'll increment the cell as needed. So now the script has everything it needs to calculate the amount that needs to get paid for those hours contained in the email. So it's going to then create a new row in the master log for that email, and it's going to fill out each column based on the data that it collected and calculated. So let's show you the script actually in action. So note that right now we have 711 rows in the master log. That in Outlook we have 11 items in the intake folder that you see. We're going to head on back to the workbook. We're going to go to the dashboard tab, and here at the bottom you see this large green button called update. and we are going to go ahead and click on update, and it's going to do some stuff, and then we're going to see a message that says update complete. New employee invoice emails have been retrieved and processed. 11 records have been processed. So what that means is now that when we go over to the master log, we're going to see that 711 was where we left off, and now we have these additional entries. And you know, there's the date. Everything's been calculated. Local, out of town, overtime, the amount to be paid, all of it's done. And if we go over to our Outlook, we see now that the intake folder is empty. There's nothing in here because the script moved all the emails to the processed folder, you know, as it went through each. The intake folder is nice and clean and ready for new entries. We've processed our payroll. We move on to the last and possibly most important phase, which is analysis. And so let's say we, roughly speaking, have 3 objectives. The first one is to see, is any job paying too much overtime? Like I said, we want to make sure that the burden of overtime is evenly spread. It's not, objective is that, is any one employee billing too much out of town work? So we may want to reassign them to jobs that are closer to them, because we want to minimize paying them extra. And then generally, you know, we want to sort of break expenses down by employee grade or employee and see. To answer these questions, we're going to head over to our dashboard. So on the dashboard, you're going to see this pie chart, these 2 bar charts, and then these slicers down here, as well as a timeline that'll allow you to narrow your data by time frame. This bar chart shows you the amount of money spent on each job. The orange portion will show you what portion of that was paid at overtime rates and what was paid at regular rates. And this allows us to answer our first question to see, is there any job that's paying too much in overtime? And we see that Darby's looks like it's paying a lot in overtime pay. So let's take a closer look at Darby's. We're going to go to our slicer and we're going to select Darby's. And that's going to filter our data for just Darby's. Now if we go over to the second bar chart, we're going to see which employee has been billing the most on this job. We see that Thorin has been billing the most, and he's also billing it out of town. So we want to see who's been billing the most overtime. So we can zoom this in, and now we're going to see for each employee what portion of their bill is overtime versus regular. And we see that Thorin is not only out of town, but he's also billing a ton of overtime. So now we can tell him to take it easy and not bill overtime the next week and give Darby's a break, and we can do that. The question we wanted to answer was to see if any employee was billing too much out of town work across the board. To do that, we're first going to go remove the filter for Darby's, and now we can see in the second bar chart that across the board it's apparent that Keeley he's billing way too much at out of town rates, because we can see the orange portion and it's huge. So now we can tell Keeley to, you know, work on projects that are closer to him to minimize his out-of-town rates. And we can also zoom in if we want. We can just filter for Keeley, and then we can drill down to see he's working at Sandy's and Burger Prince and Pizza Shack, and maybe he needs to get reassigned from one of these. Those 2 specific questions, I mean, we can use these slicers and the timeline to sort of break down the data, you know, to gain any number of insights. So like I showed you on the pie chart, when we zoom in, we see what Darby spends, you know, categorized by the employee's rank. If we want to see what's being spent per category of employee, is something that can be useful down the line when the time comes to submit proposals for new jobs. We can look back at our existing jobs and just sort of get an idea of like, well, this kind of job needs this much in terms of grade 2 hours and this much in terms of manager hours and so on. I hope that you guys liked this demonstration. I know that I had fun making this product. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. If you ever have any general VBA advice that I can help with, I'm always here. And thank you for watching. This has been Omar.